J. Martin and Ramon, 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back, Zone TVers. We're back on after a little bit of technical snafu this morning, but we're good to go. Hope everybody is well out there. Ramon Foster, Jonathan Schaefer, Jason Martin here with you. Will Boling joins us on the line from St. Thomas Sports Park. Will, what's going on?
What's up, Will the Bully?
Good morning. Jason, happy Better Call Saul
Indeed.
Day to you. Ramon, great to talk to you as well. Hope everybody had a good weekend.
Yeah, so to that point that you just made real quickly, I had somebody suggest a theory to me this weekend that I had not seen, which was the name Waterworks gives away the finale because Waterworks is one space away on a Monopoly board from jail.
Oh, wow. See, that's good stuff.
It is. I thought you would appreciate it as much as I did because I'm like, I still don't know that that's what's going to happen. But if he did end up in jail, I think that would be a satisfying way to just not kill him.
Well, and I also appreciate the fact that this show is not going to then read said theories and then do the opposite just for the sake of not making everyone be right, like Dan and Dave did with Game of Thrones about 3 years ago. So,
Yes.
I'm just thankful to have a show that I know is going to stick the landing. It isn't going to completely disappoint me. It's a good feeling.
Yep, series finale tonight. All right, so what have you seen over the last few days since the preseason game, which we all got to see?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, really, to see how the offensive line situation continues to shape up. And, again, I don't just say these things because I know that Ramon's just going to start talking about the offensive line in a couple minutes. So I figured I might as well get in front of it before he, steers the conversation to the big guys. But, I think talking with Keith Carter this morning, talking to media, interesting to hear him talk about how cerebral, how smart Nicholas Petit-Frere already is within the framework of this offense and in the meeting rooms. And, guys, I think that the joint practices, we're going to learn a lot about where the offensive line is. It feels like a situation where those one-on-ones with the big guys, it becomes more physical, it becomes so much more competitive. And I think that can be said about every position, but really until you get that first preseason experience out of the way, that is the first big checkpoint in learning about those guys. There's only so physical you're going to get with the offensive line and the defensive line in a training camp setting. So I think the competitive atmosphere they're going to be out here with Tampa Bay this week, I think is going to be really crucial for those guys. And, look, we talked about it, watching the game with you guys, which I enjoyed, seeing that first half with you guys against Baltimore last Thursday that, honestly, Nicholas Petit-Frere was one of the bright spots in that first half. A guy that looked really good, looked really comfortable. He looked like an NFL left tackle, looked like an NFL right tackle, depending on where he was at that moment. So I think for me, that's the thing I continue to monitor over these last couple of days and into this week is how that conversation continues to develop this week.
Well, one thing I've kind of noticed a little bit, we talked about it, I think, in the 7 o'clock hour, man, it's just – the amount of rest days guys have gotten. Like, Vrabel's been sprinkling that around a little bit, like a little bit of hope dust. I don't know what you want to call it, health dust, man, to get to the season. Is that something that you've kind of witnessed, with guys being in and out of practice, other than like the little dings and bruises and little knickknacks they got to get fixed in the training room?
Yeah, it seems like it's that time of camp. It's that time of the year when we start seeing – a lot of those veterans kind of be out a little bit. I think there's a little bit of concern just on my end about Roger McCreary and the time that he started to miss. And, a guy that was really coming on strong and is a little dinged up at this point of the process. Was really good to see Elijah Molden back out here over the weekend and get him kind of implemented back into the system, back into this defense the way it is right now. So, I think that's something to monitor. It's something that we're all going to overreact to the second that we hear anybody is not on the practice field on any given day. Obviously, you start to worry a bit. But, I think Titans fans can certainly take a deep breath knowing that if it's a guy that's been in the league for more than 2 or 3 years, Mike Vrabel is going to give them the benefit of the doubt and kind of give them those rest and maintenance days. So, I think with Tampa coming to town this week, Wednesday, Thursday, and we're going to see them out here for the first times, I think it's going to change a little bit of that conversation because I think it is important to have that competitive atmosphere and to have those reps against those guys. But, we'll see. We'll see how Mike Vrabel kind of manages that this week with somebody else in town.
Do you think that with the number of guys that he had to work into a lineup last year, maybe that softens your philosophy a little bit? Like, nobody's ever going to accuse Mike Vrabel of not being a hard-nosed coach, but at the same time, eventually you do not want to have to deal with that kind of reality, and you have to wonder if maybe he learned a little bit as he's grown a little bit more as a head coach into managing guys to make sure they're healthy.
Honestly, I think for me, that evaluation happened on John Robinson's end on the front end. I think that this organization wanted to find guys who fit the way Mike Vrabel wants to do things and the philosophy of just being available, which isn't really a philosophy. It's just availability. So I think that by doing that, it means Mike Vrabel doesn't have to change a whole lot of the way he operates within training camp, because he's probably told John this offseason, hey, get me receivers that can not be out here every day, or maybe receivers that are healthy enough to be out here every day. Either side of the conversation it is, I don't think he wants what he had last year. I don't think he wants receivers that make you so predictable, because they're either out there to catch passes or to be on the other side of the field while somebody else catches passes. They're not there to block. And that guy's going to be here this week as well in Julio Jones. We'll see if he actually practices this time on this field in another uniform. But, to answer your question, though, I feel like Mike Vrabel is who he is. I feel like his philosophy is what it is at this point. It's gotten him a lot of success, but I feel like this organization really emphasized the availability piece this offseason. The A.J. Brown decision was emblematic of that more than anything else they did this offseason, that, hey, we're going to invest our time and money and resources into guys that we feel like are going to be on the field and are more durable. That way we don't have to set another NFL record for most players used in a season. So I think by doing that, Mike Vrabel doesn't have to change a whole lot of the way he operates over the course of a training camp.
Well, there's one challenge that has to be addressed, man, and that's Malik staying in the pocket and passing.
Oh, yeah.
Over the last couple of days, have you seen that awareness? Have you seen that approach and that challenge given to that young guy before they get to those joint practices into the game?
He's come a long way. I think I can confidently say that at this point. Now, he's still got a long way still to go. And you want to see him go to his second progression. And this is honestly something that I think is an interesting talking point at this point at camp. I think there are a certain amount of mistakes that are a good thing to do in training camp.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to push certain lines and know the boundaries of what you are and aren't able to do, whether that's as a quarterback or as a wide receiver, certain routes you can get away with, certain moves that you can make within the secondary. I don't think this is just a quarterback conversation, but I would argue at this point that Mike Vrabel is okay with Malik Willis throwing a couple interceptions because he's trying to push the ball downfield. He's trying to go to his second read. And Mike Vrabel's been really complimentary of the decision-making for Malik Willis. That's always the first thing that he brings up when you ask him about him and say, he's made really good decisions. I think he'd be okay with some bad decisions just by the virtue of not running when his first read is not open.
Right.
They really want to see him stand in there and put his foot in the ground and make one of those really confident throws that he's making a lot, but to his second target. And that has not happened yet. You can see the thought process happening as he's double clutching, as he's trying to find guys and find a way to go to that second read. But, right now he's still got a long way to go in that department.
Is there something that you need to see kind of hashed out with these joint practices coming up, just from a team concept? I don't know if it's, getting Jeff some work in one-on-ones because he's been dealt with sparingly throughout training camp a little bit too, or seeing what, Shane is going to be able to do with this defense. Like there are some points that you want to see kind of hashed out this week, especially going against Tampa.
No, I think certainly the first one for me is, can Racey McMath continue to maintain the success and the progress that he's made over the course of this offseason? For me, I think a lot of the conversation we've had has been around the wide receivers because there's the most new faces at the wide receiver position this offseason. Treylon Burks coming off of a preseason game where he has one carry and no catches. How does he get past the first rookie wall that he's kind of hit here in training camp? We talk about the rookie wall you hit in week 7 or 8. I imagine there's certainly, to a lesser extent, one that you kind of hit through the first couple weeks of training camp, once defenders kind of figure you out a little bit. So for me, it's McMath, it's Phillips, it's Burks, it's those three guys. Can they show up in team periods like they do in individual periods? And we've talked about that, guys, in my visit with you guys last week, that Kyle Phillips has been great in one-on-ones. Hasn't really sustained that in 11-on-11 or even really 7-on-7 as much. Started to come on strong a little bit a couple of weeks ago going into preseason game 1. Didn't really have a big impact against Baltimore. So, I want to see those wide receivers continue to be the guys that they are in those one-on-ones. And I want to see how this offensive line holds up. I mentioned it off the top that I think you get more opportunities to be a little bit more physical, a little bit more competitive going up against a different team within one-on-ones from an offensive line standpoint. Aaron Brewer continues to be the conversation point on that offensive line. Can he hold up at left guard? And is Nicholas Petit-Frere good enough at right tackle to push Dylan Radins inside, to be a left guard long term? I don't think that's a conversation yet, but I think it's certainly one that this team might be open to if things go south at that position this season. So offensive line, wide receiver, it's always the offense. It's interesting how quickly we trust this defense so much after what they did last year.
So, Will, if you're looking at it from your perspective, who are the receivers that are likely to be the odd men out here?
I think Josh Malone is an odd man out right now. Look, honestly, I wouldn't have said this a couple weeks ago. I think Terry Godwin has come on really strong. Good performance for him in Baltimore. Really had a good day there. Just continues to show up. He's just making plays anytime he's in those team periods with all three quarterbacks. Continues to just kind of pop up and do some good things. But I think Racey McMath is Sharpie on this team right now.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question that he has made this roster as a deep threat wide receiver, but also as a kick returner, as a tackler on special teams at this point. So I would certainly have him in. Phillips and Burks, obviously. Westbrook-Akina is kind of sharpied in at this point with what he did last year. Obviously, Robert Woods, who Buck Rising is going to sit down with today after practice on his show around 11:15. But from there, I think it's a battle between Godwin, Malone, Mason Kinsey, I would say, is another odd man out at this point. But I think Terry Godwin might be the first man off that bubble right now, just by way of how good Racey McMath has been at this point.
You didn't even mention Dez.
I didn't. I mean, he continues to just not really be super consistent, and Godwin has really outperformed him in those team periods pretty quickly. And for me, despite Dez being the offseason award winner for this offense, putting together some good days, I still think this team can feel confident about keeping him on the practice squad. Godwin has performed admirably enough within training camp that I think there might be a little bit of attention for him there elsewhere. I mean, especially when you've got another team that's going to come in and watch all of these guys this week. Like as you guys know, this is an audition to make 2 NFL teams, really, so to speak, this week at least. Right? So, I would put Godwin as the first man out. I'd probably put Fitzpatrick right behind him at this point, and then Malone and Kinsey after that.
Man, a point of, something that I thought needed to be corrected for this Titans team, specifically the defense, as you said. We trusted a good bit, Will, was during the game, dog, it was bad tackling on the outside edges from the cornerbacks. I thought that was an area, if we're going to be nitpicking a little bit, has to be cleaned up. Have you seen an emphasis on that so far over the weekend, and you think that'll be something they work at in these joint practices?
Yeah, I think it's certainly something they're going to have an emphasis on this week, just getting Tampa Bay in town. I would expect to see that kind of take a step up starting on Wednesday when we're out here. Look, I mean, the guy that flashed in that department was Theo Jackson against Baltimore, a guy that is really good at that, just playing really, really fast, see ball, hit ball, and making those plays on the outside. Has blown up a fair share of screen passes in his day at Tennessee and was pretty successful in that arena against Baltimore as well last Thursday. But, I do think that is a point of emphasis for this team. I think being more physical, even before the ball was thrown, you saw Caleb Farley getting pushed around just a little bit on one of those routes on that quick comeback that he gave up on the opening drive. So, I just think that is the beauty of joint practices, right? The physicality, the tempers that'll flare a little bit. I think that's a good thing for this team at this point, to kind of take that energy out a little bit and for this defense to become more physical on the boundary.
I think this is a good showing, too, for this team. We went through, just the amount of double-digit players that Tampa has on their roster as compared to what the Titans have. The Titans have mostly a youthful team, guys that might be 8 years or less on the team other than Tannehill, man, and Brett Kern. But the experience that these guys are going to get this week to kind of operate and see the way this Todd Bowles staff kind of challenges them specifically through the air, because with the Titans being a run-first team, they're going to have to be able to stop teams that, air it out because the Titans hold on to the ball a long time. What kind of challenge does this mean for Kevin, for Bayer, for Christian, I'm targeting Caleb Farley this week again if I'm them.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a huge week for those defensive backs. Obviously not having Brady here kind of changes that a little bit. And his availability will change, the look that you get from Blaine Gabbert, from Kyle Trask, from the other quarterbacks that are going to be throwing against these Titans defensive backs. But, I think specifically, how many times have we seen those one-on-one videos of McCreary versus Burks?
Yeah.
Of Farley versus Phillips or Byard versus Phillips. I think that you get to a point, and Ramon, you know this as well as anybody, that somebody's fastball.
You're right.
You get in one-on-ones, the move that somebody across from you is trying to do to get past you. It's a clean slate here, at least for day one. You don't know what, the receiver on the other side is going to try to do to get past you. You don't know what Mike Evans is trying to do the first day in individual period. So it's a completely clean slate. And I think this kind of hones those instincts that are so important on the football field when, you see a guy you haven't seen as much film on. Somebody goes out, you get a backup in there, and you don't know specifically what X or Y slot receiver is going to do to you, so you trust your instincts of what you are doing within the framework of the defense to get a stop on that given play. I think that's what's going to be honed in on those first couple of days, and I think specifically you're right to point out those defensive backs as the guys who could stand to benefit the most from trial by fire a little bit, and I think they're going to get it because McCreary's not going up against the same fellow rookie wide receiver that he's seen probably 7 or 8 times in one-on-ones just through the first 2 weeks of camp so far.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say 2 defensive-minded head coaches. Todd Bowles, known for it. Coach Vrabel, known for it, man. Who's going to bend the knee wheel as far as keeping a clean practice?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, we've seen a little bit of friction already with some of these guys and some of the big guys battling with the new offensive linemen that are out there for the Titans. I see this Tennessee Titans defense just being so competitive during every practice, and Mike Vrabel wants to emphasize, yelling at his guys, hey, go celebrate. You scored a touchdown. Go celebrate.
Yeah.
Says after practice that day, probably a week and a half ago, says it's hard to score in this league. We want to celebrate. We want to practice celebrating the right way with your team. This defense is not going to back down from continuing to celebrate and continuing to treat this like they do their own practices. So I think if anybody's going to, bring up the temperature of practice a little bit, I think it's the Titans defense just celebrating a pass breakup and doing what DBs do, as you know, Ramon, as an affable offensive lineman who is certainly of the most humble position group. I'm speaking to I know the audience I'm speaking to right now. The defensive backs are always trying to do the most. I see these Titans defensive backs, as young as they are, not knowing any different than doing the most and making it known if and when they make a stop on this Bucs offense.
All right, well, go get out there and start watching practice.
Got ladder drills to go film, gentlemen. Ladder drills, all of them. It's 3 weeks in.
Yeah, don't be Jim Wyatt. Don't fall off that ladder.
I think I might do, honestly, what our buddy Grant Ramey does. I don't know if you've seen. If anyone doesn't follow him, you should, because he does one slow motion like ladder drill or tackling sled video. He does a slow motion video with NFL Films music in the background from every Tennessee practice, and it gets at least a half a laugh from me every time. So if I can just create some kind of content like that, it'll be a good day.
Keep pushing, Will. Keep pushing, baby.
All right, Will. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, boys.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
That's Bill Boling right there.
Bill Boling, Will the bully, baby.
We'll come back. We will finish up this edition of the J. Martin Ramon Experience next here on The Zone.
104.5 The Zone's high school football game of the week returns this Friday with Will Boling and Lucas Panzica. Tune in to hear Mount Juliet at Gallatin starting at 7 o'clock this Friday right here on 104.5 The Zone.
J. Mart and Ramon, 104.5 The Zone. Buck Rising coming up next. You heard Bobby Trees will be on with him.
Bobby Trees.
Bobby Trees from now.
That's the drop. Season's coming together, man. I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday, and he was just like, I'm so glad to have this back.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you don't realize, like, I guess you make it through that summer stretch, Jay, and it's just boring. And I've even enjoyed watching baseball more, but I'm like, give me something.
Especially this summer because it's been so hot.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I even said over the weekend, it's just like I watched a lot of fake football and enjoyed it, even though it's pretty irrelevant just because it's people in football uniforms doing football-ish stuff. And it just reminds me we're a couple weeks away from the games that count. And we're getting to where the news that we're going to have is going to be good news again and not just all the bad news of injuries and contract disputes and all this other stuff. Games are about to be played in college and high school obviously in the NFL. Like, here we go.
Finally, right? I think 18 days from the kickoff of fall season. We're that much closer to that one. Ball State on the Thursday night.
Really, the season doesn't start until Pittsburgh, right?
I mean, well, yeah, technically. But, of course.
I'm having fun, Blaine.
I was just going to say, well, we got to do the Blaine's University anyway, right? We can have an open bet on that one. And y'all tell Blaine, I'll give him the points for it. I'll give him the points for that game. We're already giving him a check. Right? So it is what it is.
I'm a VAA. I'm one of those that thinks the Vols are all right.
I did not realize. I actually didn't realize Keaton Slovis was a quarterback at Pittsburgh.
Keaton Slovis? Yep. Am I supposed to know about him?
I did not realize that. Transfer from USC.
Oh, so they took a player and gave one away? Is that what happened?
Well, they already had Slovis, but then Addison jumped from Pitt over to USC.
Well, it's because he saw Slovis.
Slovis
was already gone.
He was decent.
I kid.
A bad situation.
Pittsburgh just have a hard time recruiting. It's an what do you want to call it?
They're actually recruiting better now than they have in quite some time.
But to attract those type of players, though, it's tough for them.
They're a mid-level ACC program despite winning the ACC last year.
I know. They what did they have last year, though?
Top middle would be probably the very highest you could rate.
What was the key to their winning success last year? It was a quarterback. Yep, it was a quarterback.
They're kind of what Boston College was for a couple of years there.
But I respect Boston College more, though, because I feel like they're consistently ahead.
Pitt has a much richer history, although that doesn't matter now when you're talking to recruits.
But you just see what a quarterback means. You had Pickett last year. You had Matt Ryan at Boston College at one point. Yeah. Like, it's just huge.
It is.
And what you're getting out of Pitt now are defensive players more than anything else.
Yes.
Aside from Kenny Pickett, you're getting a lot of good defensive players coming out of Pitt.
They're known for the development of defensive linemen.
And Narduzzi is a defensive guy.
It makes all the sense in the world, then. But you're right. The history of that program is pretty good, man. But, yeah, we got opened up with Ball State in about 18 days, man. I'm looking to hear from Blaine sometime soon. Yeah, September 1st. On a Thursday night.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Thursday night football.
Yep.
I'll be up, tuned in.
And all 8 hours of all network coverage.
Thought about making
they're cutting back this year.
Thought about making the trip, though,
actually,
but it's a Thursday night.
Longer pregame this year.
Is it?
Adding an extra 30 minutes. Yeah.
Hey, now. There we go. Turn up.
I love it, but it's
feed the beast, Jay, is what we got to do.
Dog.
Got to feed the beast, baby.
Come on, man.
Where's Ball State at anyway? Ohio?
I was going to say
Ball State's Indiana.
Indiana.
Is Indiana?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, for sure.
The thing is, the one that I always forget is that Bowling Green is in Ohio.
Yes. I kind of figured it was there, but I'm also just trying to stoke the fire on this matchup with Blaine. Because I know Blaine got a very competitive side to him.
You know what else, Ramon? Your transcripts ain't no good.
My transcripts were real good. I got my degree, man.
C's for degrees.
C's for degrees.
Got a cold chill to end the show. Legitimately.
You turned your head and shook like a dog, though, Jay.
Oh, I'm so glad the video was on for that. That was great.
I get those from time to time these days.
Yeah.
The wife looks at me all the time like it's something wrong. No, I just get super cold, and I'll have a cold chill pop out of nowhere.
But you turned your head and shook like a dog, or you went sideways and then you
No, that's more.
That looked like he was getting a hernia test.
We'll do it again 4 more hours tomorrow. Ron Slay will be here. Buck Rising will join us on the show. Brian Rice from Knoxville will catch up with Vols Country as well. For Ramon and Shay from J Mart, remember Bobby Trees coming up with Buck in a couple of hours. He's live from training camp next. See you tomorrow.
And remember, your Twitter fingers and your mic is always hot.